Hey, LinkedIn, and welcome to Business Unusual. This is a live show where we talk about the ways coronavirus is impacting the way we work and the way we live. I am Susie Jackson. I am a news editor at LinkedIn, coming to you live from my home in New York City. On the show today, we want to talk about teachers, and we're going to talk with teachers. We have a great panel of teachers joining us from across the country. COVID-19 has pushed the classroom online in a really rapid fashion. Parents, teachers, administrators had to react quickly to figure out how to take care of students. We are seeing people homeschooling who are not prepared to homeschool. We're seeing teachers who are struggling to or scrambling to get lesson plans together, who maybe thought that they were going to be in this virtual situation for a couple of weeks, a month. Most schools are now doing this throughout the rest of the school year. And there's even some thought, is this going to continue into the fall semester as well? Access to tech has been spotty. Students don't always have the hardware. Maybe they don't have Wi-Fi reliably. It's been a rush for teachers to get lesson plans together, to learn how to teach virtually themselves, for students to learn how to learn virtually, for parents to have to step in to that teaching role, trying to assign work, trying to provide some sort of structure in the day. It's been a lot. So we wanted to bring on some teachers today to talk about how this change has looked from their side. We're going to hear about what it's been like for them to have to make this change so quickly. They're also going to speak to their new teaching colleagues, the parents of this country now, who are all stepping in a teaching capacity. I would like to bring the teachers in just let's get going first. I would love to introduce Nadia Lopez. She is the founder and principal at Paul Bridges Academy, a school for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders in New York City. We also have Kareem Neal, Arizona's 2019 Teacher of the Year. He teaches special ed at Maryvale High School in Phoenix, Arizona. Treva Daniels-Carlson is a coach for other teachers, as well as a teacher herself of French, psychology, and sociology at the high school level at the Beecher Community Schools in Flint, Michigan. And finally, we have Laura Morin, a high school math teacher, joining us from Palmer Trinity School in South Florida. Everyone, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. I mean, it's really wonderful to see you all together. I know that you've all been thrown into this, and I think from what we've been talking about, you're handling it really well. I want to jump right into it. Nadia, I want to start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about your school and what you did when you learned on a Sunday night that the New York City school systems would be closing?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Susie. Paul Bridges Academy is a middle school located in the Brownsville section of Brooklyn. For anyone who would ever Google it, we are in a neighborhood that's considered one of the most dangerous and impoverished communities in New York City. When we found out that schools were closing on the Sunday without any other notification, we weren't allowed to go back into the building until Tuesday. So immediately, I reached out to the teacher leads, the school-based support team that is inclusive of our guidance counselor and director of programs, as well as one of our contracted support members. And we had a 2-hour meeting on Monday. And what we did was a needs assessment. What do we know that we already have in the school in terms of online platforms, the number of scholars that we have in temporary housing, how many of our scholars have special needs, and those two numbers are very significant. We have 32% of our scholars, which means 64 of them have special needs. However, because of the community that we serve, it's actually about, when you consider those who are at risk, we're more along the lines of 75 to 80% of our scholars who need additional support. And so we had to really figure out how could we best support them, considering that many wouldn't have technology, they wouldn't have access to Wi-Fi, and how could we ensure that our teachers were ready? Because as much as we want to get the scholars the technology, it's a matter of how well versed are the teachers able to get online and actually engage with the young people? Because, you know, it's not just about putting up an assignment and a PDF and saying, do the work. It's about how do we actively engage with them? And so we did all of that work in the 2 hours so that on the Tuesday, when we returned back to the school as a collective, everyone was charged with what they needed to do with their departments. The teachers were ready. Those who had a learning curve got professional development, and that was really team related because we don't have the funding to provide our staff with the adequate professional development. We don't have a computer science teacher. We really have a point person, and they all got on board. We created packets for every single scholar. So we have 210 children. We created packets for every single subject area. We included books, reading books, because in poor neighborhoods, children don't have libraries in their home. The libraries are closed in their neighborhoods. We have over 40 gangs, so the kids can't even go from place to place to the libraries. And so we had to think of all of those things. And we distributed them the Thursday and the Friday. Those scholars who did not have technology, the little technology that we did have in our schools, we actually just distributed it to them in hopes that the scholars would be able to get online. But in the interim, the Department of Education has provided those children who are in shelters with the built-in Wi-Fi iPads for them to use at home. So that's how we got started.
That's amazing. It sounds like you really sprang into action. You had limited time. You probably knew something was coming, but you took that time to have a quick meeting. What are our needs? What do we have? What don't we have? What do we need? And let's just spring into action and do it. Kareem, I want to ask you. You also teach a population of students who need a lot of support. Can you tell us about what your instruction was like before all of this happened, and then what's changed for you the most?
So I teach a self-contained special education classroom at Maryvale High School. Also, thanks for having me. And in that classroom, I have 4 paraprofessionals and myself. And actually, my class is like a U-shaped because whenever I instruct in front of the class, my paraprofessionals kind of sit near 2 or 3 students to help them with instruction because they need that kind of close to one-on-one support. And so their learning levels are different. My students are 9 through 12, but their learning levels are kind of pre-K, K, or first grade level. And so now I'm doing one-on-one sessions with my students all day because teaching them as a whole group wasn't really working. It was really hard to engage them. And my students also, they will need their parents with them to kind of turn on computers and things like that. So it was an interesting transition also. And my district did a really good job. I teach in the Phoenix Union High School District, and my school, Maryvale, did a really good job in telling us to just reach out to parents, connect with them for a couple of weeks while they actually went and delivered laptops to students. They were working on internet options to make sure all students had access to learning that way. They also put together kind of the packet runs and things like that. And so it's been very different though, because my students kind of need more intensive one-on-one type instruction as much as possible. And in a classroom, I could bounce around and my paraprofessionals could bounce around and see all the students all the time. And what would actually be really helpful, and my school did a great thing with one of my paraprofessionals got a laptop also so that they can do she can do one-on-one instruction with my students. But it's mostly just me kind of doing quick one-on-one sessions with students. It helps me connect with their parents a bit. It helps me connect with them. And it's really probably the only way online learning can happen. My students really need kind of a lot of in-person instruction, to tell you the truth. Like we do things like, they're painting and building things and kind of some work skills that are more hands-on. So it's been tricky, but doing the best we can.
Yeah, and thank you for the important work to all of you. If you're just joining us now, this is Business Unusual. This is LinkedIn's live show where we talk about coronavirus and the way it is impacting the way we work. We have a fabulous panel of teachers who are speaking with us today about the quick transition they had to make to a complete remote online learning environment. And I have a lot of teachers joining us from the stream. I wanted to say hello to you real quick and introduce you to our panelists. We have Mikia, who is a high school English teacher and a school of education professor at IU Indy. We have Peter and Janine, who teaches public high school math. Hello. We have Sydney from Vancouver, Michelle from Detroit. Thank you all for joining us today. I hope you are getting as much as I already am out of this wonderful panel of teachers. We're hearing that support is really crucial, thinking through not just lesson plans, but how are you going to get your students connected? How are you going to be there for them as much in an in-person way as you can, given that you can't actually be there in person, especially if they've needed that kind of one-on-one individual attention in the past. Treva, I want to ask you, what was it like when you first logged on with your senior class for your first class with them?
Well, first of all, Susan, thank you for inviting me, and it's good to be here with the rest of the panel. I would say the first word that comes to mind is relief for them, because they need that one-on-one human interaction, but they also had a lot of questions. How are we going to do this? What do we still have to do these particular requirements because we don't have the laptop? So it was a lot of talking folks off the ledge, if you will, and just reassuring that I've got you. We're going to get you across that stage.
Yeah, and can you tell me, you're a coach for other teachers as well, what kind of conversations were you having with them? What was their biggest concern coming into this about going completely remote so quickly?
Well, our situation was very much as Dr. Lopez and Kareem described. We also had that sit-down session, basically that Friday, the day after the governor of Michigan announced initial closures. And we've provided packets and handed out technology as well. But the main thing was, again, reassuring staff that may not be using technology so much. Here are the platforms we have. I can help you. There are other people here in the building that can help you. So we did a mini PD that day as well. I've also reached out to my staff, since we have been closed out for face-to-face instruction. And what platforms are you using? How can I help you? I'm sending out a lot of training links, a lot of through Simple K-12, which can count for certification as well. And just what do you need? If you need to have a one-on-one Zoom meeting with me, I'm happy to do that. So it's providing some resources, but also the hands-on instruction. And many on that Friday, I had to sit down with them one-on-one and walk through some things and just reassure everyone, we're all stressed right now, but we're going to get through this together.
Yeah, so it's that reassurance on from the teacher to the student, and from the teacher as well. We have Fred in the stream saying that he has a tip. He suggests using Google Classroom. I know many of you are already using that. Laura, in addition to learning something like Google Classroom or whatever platform your school is using, you also have students in other time zones. Can you talk us through how you've had to change the structure of your day, how you're approaching that, and trying to find some semblance of balance between learning how to be a teacher remotely, having kids all over the world, and having your own children at home too, that you're also having to homeschool?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I am in an independent school. And so when this transition happened, we didn't have the hurdle of device availability because we are one-on-one already. So the only hurdle for students attaining devices we had was to make sure that they turned in their laptops for any type of upgrades or any type of issues they were having with microphones or with cameras. So with that said, we're part of an international school. So we have a percentage of our students that come from different parts of the world. So I found out within the first week of trying to adapt to platforms and, how am I going to get all the content to my students? I found out that 2 of my students were returning to their home in China. And so when I first communicated with them, it was challenging to have them Zoom into group class sessions, which were working well for my students because they were 12 hours ahead. So I couldn't ask a student to Zoom in at 2 p.m., which for them would have been 2 a.m. So I thought a little bit about how I was going to structure that. And what I decided was to create 2 to 3 times a week where I just Zoom with them in a time that's convenient for them and also works for me. So 2 to 3 times a week, I Zoom at 9 p.m. with my students who are in China. And I save that time for specific questions that they have about the content that's being delivered. So what I've been able to do is record individual lessons and upload them in a way that they can access them. And so then the time that I Zoom with them is individual questions about the content that has been presented, or also just supporting them. I mean, both of these students, one left a week before the other. Both of these are 15-year-olds who went back home, but when they arrived in China, they were quarantined for 14 days alone in a hotel. So being able to Zoom with them was really important, to just support them and say, hey, I'm here. How are you doing? How's the hotel? How's your food? Have you talked to your family today? So I was not prepared for that. And so we just are flexible and empathetic, and that's what we're doing. And so part of the support the first few days for that first student was not mathematics. It was just, how are you feeling? Last night when I was answering mathematics question, one of my students said, I'm not sleeping. I miss my family, because he's still quarantined. So then the conversation for me was, okay, what can I do for you? How can we get you into a routine where you can rest more? How can we support you? So, issues are coming up that I did not expect. And so I'm trying to be, human and support children. And, oh, by the way, teach them a little bit of math.
Yeah, support is such a huge word, and we're hearing it in the stream as well. We have Chris saying thank you to all the educators out there working so hard on behalf of your students. I appreciate your adaptability, strength, and continued advocacy. And support is something I want to talk about more too. You're talking about, Laura, supporting your students in these ways you weren't anticipating, that are a little bit different than what you've done before. Nadia, can you tell us, in what ways is your school supporting teachers and supporting parents as well?
Just before the pandemic, it was always important for us to support our team, our families, because of the issues of poverty. There's a lot of trauma that many of our families experience, but it also creates vicarious trauma and triggers for our team. So since I opened the school, we always had a contracted mental health provider. So for the past 10 years, my staff has always had access to a mental health provider who would come to the school twice a week from 10 to 3 and provide them with the support. And he was even on call. And so that work has continued. Because of the issues of being quarantined, a lot of people may live alone. They're dealing with a lot of anxiety. We've had staff members who have dealt with death, whether it was COVID related or it just was a family member who had health issues, like literally in their households, and still showing up for work. And so not being able to grieve the way they needed to, not being able to express what it feels to have a loss, and then having to be confined in their homes, especially in New York City. If you're not living in a home where there may be a backyard for you to just even go outside for some fresh air, it's really, really difficult. But in addition to that, we wanted to make sure that our parents were supported. We have a lot of families that the average number of individuals in the household could be 5 or 6 people. And so it's a lot. And when you have parents who have young children who are in the school system, who all need support, many of them, if you have one child who has special needs, unfortunately, in our community, the likelihood is that multiple children in the family have special needs as well. And the parent has limitations. So there's anger management issues. There's issues of depression. A lot of our families, they suffer with schizophrenia, just a myriad of disabilities. So we have provided them every other week with a mental health support group that meets online. So in lieu of our scholars going into, we have Google Classrooms. That's the way that we provide our instruction. They literally have set up a Google Classroom for mental health support for our families. And then we also do parent-teacher conference as well. And that's just really, really important because, we have to make sure that we normalize mental health right now. The fear that many of us as educators have is that PTSD is not something that's going to happen after the fact. It's actually happening right now. And we have a lot of people who are fearful. What does this mean when we go back to school? What does this mean for me to be back, amongst people and there's no more social distancing? There are so many things that stand in the way of educating the child that oftentimes people on the outside just don't realize. So for us, we have taken the stance of the human being is the most important element to this. So we have to take care of their mind, their souls, and ensuring that physically they're okay. And then we get to the education. The priority is the mental health, the social emotional needs that our families and our staff has.
Treva, that what Nadia was saying, I think is really important, and it reminds me of something that I know you were thinking about, which is when this is all over, if it's all over, if we go back to whatever our normal was before, what are some of the things you hope come from this in terms of the social behaviors and the things that we are talking about now that have been more exposed, mental health, access, equality? Can you talk to us about that?
In our district, we refer to it as a family. The teachers and the parents will greet one another in the hallway and hug and talk about whatever issues are. We had a student text us the very first day that we were closed and said, "What am I going to do? This was my safe place." You know, we all contacted that student, all of his teachers. We had a parent who was texting the principal, and another parent was frantic, and she said, "It's okay, it's okay." Because what I like about the staff is they're accessible. And I think that that's the main thing, is we have to maintain that atmosphere of being a family and supporting one another and take it up even another notch. I think we're certainly more aware of limitations and how we just need to be mindful of other people and not so focused on ourselves. I think mental health is a huge issue. We also have a large number of students who need or receive services, and funding is inadequate for that. So I would hope that that is one thing that is an issue that some will start to work on, is that funding issue for support. But even within our district, we support one another already. So I see that continuing. It's just a matter of what else do we need? What are the other layers of support needed?
Thank you for that. And we have Deb in the stream echoing that as well. She says, COVID has given us all a lot to look at about how wide the gap is in this country. Excuse me, my doorbell's ringing. I'll be back in just a moment. Thank you for bearing with me. You never know when a delivery is going to come in the middle of a live show. Getting back to what Deb was saying, that we should be doing everything in our power to make sure all students are provided with the same opportunities. She's speaking about devices, broadband services, etc. And my husband is now taking the delivery, so I am going to use that as an opportunity to talk about what has this disruption been like for students. We have people on either end of the spectrum. Maybe they're in a really cush place and they have their laptop and their Wi-Fi and everything's fine. We have other students who are in more challenging life situations every day who that's not the case. Kareem, can you talk to us about that? We're talking a lot about family and community and support. What has this disruption been like for your students?
So for my students, I mean, there's some students that I have that rely so much on routine that a break in the routine causes kind of extreme behaviors that you would not expect to see from kind of the typical student. So it's been rough on some, and there's other students in my class who, for instance, that might, every time they see me in a one-on-one session, ask me when we're going back to school, right? Because they're not quite as tapped into this, kind of internet world of, oh, schools are closed to here and all that. And even hearing it one time is not enough. So it's been really tough. And so, like, I've been stressing to people, anybody who'll listen to me, that we should be focusing on kind of community building right now. And like, this is a great time to really kind of forge stronger relationships with the parents in your classroom and the therapists that work with the students. Because they're, like we talked about with, people not having access, like to start, because a lot of schools just like jumped in and was like, let's go, grades are going to happen. We're still going to be doing our curriculum and we need to get going on whether it be packets or whether it be online learning. And I thought it was a great time for building community, because a lot of people didn't have some of those resources that we had. There were students that had a hard time getting in touch with because phones were cut off, or people who, of course, did not have internet, and schools like mine, where the school was kind of rallying to make sure all students had computers and internet access. So it's really more trying on some communities than others. And I think this is a great time for schools to look at true equity, and not just schools, states, federal, to look at true school equity, and how there are schools that definitely do not have resources that other schools have. There's students who totally do not have the options of doing some of the things that other schools can, and it's frustrating to hear. Like I had a quick little online article about grading, and I was like, I don't think grading should be happening right now. And it was frustrating to hear so many, whether educators and parents, talking about that's ridiculous. How do we do this? And what the problem is, they couldn't even consider a world where people did not have access to the internet, and people didn't have access to even some of those paper packets that are going home, right? And didn't have working phones. People couldn't even consider that thought. And it's like, now is the time to start considering that stuff. Like, there is like some major inequity in schools. And the school district 20 minutes from ours, Paradise Valley, is one of the richest in the country. And they were able to just jump right into it. It's like, okay, sweet, online learning, that'll work. Everybody already has a computer. Everybody has working internet. It's perfect. Everybody's phones are good. Let's go, right? Our school, it was like, okay, we need to wait for students to have computers, right? And it took several weeks for that. So it's just different. And like I said, for my students particularly, keeping in mind that when routines are broken for some students, it comes across differently than just, I'm frustrated that I can't go to school and see my friends. I mean, there's students, who are home right now, maybe, throwing their laptops or self-abusing because of schedules being changed or broken. And so we really need to consider full school communities, and not just kind of the standard, like, upper middle class, family.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and I'm glad we have an opportunity to talk about it on the show today, because if you're in a bubble where everything is normal, you might not even be aware of it. And I think it's important to keep getting that message out there. Real quick, we have members in the stream saying that that one great universal resource to them has been PBS. They're saying that there's lots of information and educational programming on there for free. Kareem, I think the question of grading is really interesting. So you've said that you think it should not be a priority right now. I'm curious, to other people on the panel, Laura, over to you. What do you think about grading in this time?
I think that assessment is definitely important, but I think that being creative is more important. And so you can assess whether students are understanding whatever skills that you're presenting in different ways. So whereas I may have been able to present, a formal paper test more often in a live, one-to-one school setting, now I may have to find a different way to have students convey that they're understanding the material to me. So that may look like, having a student in a school where they all have access to devices, come up with videos, or maybe having a situation where if you're checking in with students one-on-one, you can give or ask them a question, and they can, orally live explain to you how to, solve a problem in the case of mathematics. So I think assessment is important. I think it's a really good tool. I think for myself, assessment tells me if students are understanding what I'm sharing with them. So it's not a one-sided tool where I'm assessing whether students are retaining. I'm also assessing whether what I'm presenting is making an impact. So I do think it's important, but I do think it's a great time to be creative and to broaden what assessment means. I mean, assessment doesn't have to be paper and pencil. I know, for instance, I'm an advanced placement teacher. The advanced placement exam, they just up and changed it. My calculus students were going to take a 3.5-hour exam, and the college board decided, what, we're not going to do that. So they decided they're still going to assess students, but it's going to be a 45-minute online test, completely restructured it. but they're still giving the students the opportunity to demonstrate what they have learned. So I don't think we should scrap assessment completely. I do think we need to be careful about equity, and I do think we need to cater assessment to the communities that we're a part of, but also be creative and find ways for students to get excited about showing you what they're learning and what they're retaining.
Yeah, and talking about the access point some more, we have Stan in the stream who is saying, I have a niece in Iowa who teaches in a rural district that doesn't even have internet. How is she supposed to do her job every day? And we're talking about creativity too. Nadia, I wanted to go over to you. This is a very connected internet example, but tell me, what are some of the things that you've been doing, as Laura says, to get your students excited? I know you've been using social media in creative ways.
Yeah, we do a lot of competitions on social media. So when they do their work, they get to upload it because a lot of our scholars are on Instagram and Facebook. So they tag the school, we repost it. And we have a community of folks who are just, becoming cheerleaders and supporting our scholars in their work. Um, but you're right, there are a lot of limitations, especially when it comes to the use of technology. And as I was listening to what everyone has to say, especially when it came to the grading policy, I just think that it's important for us to be flexible. One size doesn't fit all. And so in New York City, they have released a grading policy, but it allows for a lot of flexibilities for schools to determine what that looks like. Because in my school, I go online every single day just to sit in the classrooms, not to be an evaluator. I've always felt like in order for my staff to grow, it's about me being supportive first. And so I just look and I sit in the classrooms to be a support to the kids, to be their cheerleaders, and to also provide the teacher with feedback. And now that we've just finished week 5, um, and I'm losing time, it could be week 5, week 6. What's very interesting is that children are being like the adults. Like sometimes you'll ask a question when you're on video conferencing and no one is answering the question. And you find a lot of the adults becoming frustrated because I don't know if you're there. I don't know if you're hearing me. I don't know if you're getting it. And what I had to tell the team is like, sometimes we just have to take a step back. Like we're very flexible when it comes to just our schedule for the day. Teachers only have to be online for the time that they're mandated to teach, which is 90 minutes. And outside of that, they can push into other classes, or they can be doing grading, working one-on-one with kids. But we also know that they have family members at home. And you have a lot of educators who are raising their own children who have to be online and they have to learn. So we try to be as flexible as possible. A lot of our teachers are teaching with their kids on their lap, because we want the scholars to know like this is real. This is impacting every single one. And that also encourages the kids to say, you know what, if my teacher is showing up with his or her daughter, I need to show up too. But incentivizing, and we play a lot of games. So like there's a game called Kahoot. There's a game called Quizbee. Just finding different ways to connect. And then when it comes to ELA, they use a lot of videos, movies. Like everyone has said, this is the time for us to really be creative because honestly, adults are checking out as well, right? We're over it. We're over the meetings online. And so we're expecting kids, who have a short attention span to literally be on the computers all day. And it's unfair. So right now, it's about the data that we should be collecting is how long are kids staying on? What are they staying on for? What are the most successful things that we're seeing? How can we implement more? How can we be more flexible? What are parents saying? This is the time to ask those questions because we're really in service of the children and their families. It's not about us.
Yeah, I think flexibility is an important point, and there's some comments in the stream that hit on that too. Claudia is talking about essential workers, that there are parents who can't stay home. They're going out to work to try to keep a roof over their families' heads. She's talking about the children suffering in that case. And Janine is saying something similar, that lots of kids come to school to feel safe. So we're trying to maintain this safety, this connection, this sense of progress for the kids, for the parents, for the society. I'm seeing a question about the future in the stream. I'm thinking that we should do a lightning round here. I'd love to hear each of your answers on this. Nikia wants to know how this pandemic will change the system of education in the US. Laura, let's start with you. Give us your quick answer on that. How is US education going to change based on what's been happening now?
I think this is a great opportunity for every educational institution, district, state to reflect on equity and talking about making sure that every mini system within every large system has access. So that's the one thing that needs to happen. And then the second thing is it's a time to evaluate the systems that are in place that are working. I know we have an advisory system at my school where every adult in the building has 10 students that they monitor. And those are not kids that I necessarily teach. And that's been wonderful for me to check in with those 10 souls in my building, and each one of us can report unique issues. So I think it's a really good opportunity to reflect on what is working, what systems are working, but also equity and access, and how do we make sure moving forward that everybody does have what they need to move forward.
Thank you. Treva, same question to you. What's going to change going forward with US education?
We have had teachers having to learn new platforms, new technology overnight. I can see staff to continue using those resources as we see the ease of use for many of those things, the enlarged cache of resources. So I can see that continuing. I see staff also just becoming more sensitive and aware of certain students that maybe they didn't think about before having gone through this. Certainly more creativity in structuring what the day looks like. This is an opportunity for schools across the nation to rebuild their systems, their building systems, if need be. Like she said, what's working, what's not working. Now's the time, now's the opportunity to change that, to grow, to help our scholars and their families move forward. So I can see the staff changing. I would hope that the infrastructure also changes so there is equity, so there is the ability to have resources such as devices and connectivity. But I think it's not going to be an overnight change. This is going to be something that's going to take years. Let's just be real with it. Years to put things into place. As we've gone through this pandemic, it's been like an onion. You saw one issue, but then you find there's another and another and another. So I think it starts with self as well. Also realizing, where am I in this situation? What can I do right now? Not worrying about this person over here. What am I doing that is effective or ineffective? And let's fix that. Now let's move forward.
Thank you. I think you're right, Treva. I think this is going to take a long time. Nadia, what do you see changing from this in the short term, at least?
I want to remain hopeful and say that because of the pandemic, the inequities that was unearthed, not just in communities that, whether they're in rural or suburban areas that are poor, no matter the race, but based off of social class, we also need to consider the inequities of our educators in terms of their professional development and what they actually need to thrive in classrooms, whether it's online or offline. And I hope that we can begin to make sure that mental health is normalized and provided for all of our staff as well as children in our schools. But the reality is that the only way that we can actually change the system is going to have to come from parents. Teachers have been asking, advocating, protesting, writing articles, saying the same thing over and over again. Things need to change. Now that parents are having to teach their children at home, they are faced with understanding standards, understanding that learning has changed from the time that they were in school, how assessments may be fair or unfair for their children. We need the parents, the voters, the ones who are paying the taxes, to go to their elected officials, to show up to parent-teacher meetings, to really express what their concerns are, because that's when change actually comes. And we cannot allow textbook companies to run what's going to happen with our schools after the fact, because everyone is going to have whether it's tech agents, tech companies who come with a quick fix, who are going to say that they have the answer and force us to learn something new. We will still be in bondage, right? We were forced to go from a antiquated school system that was 50 years behind to go into the 21st century in a matter of days. And there's still tremendous gaps. So I would ask, I'm charging all of the adults, the parents, the families, the guardians, please use your voice and really support educators, because without you, nothing will change.
I think that's a great point. Agitating for parents to get more involved, and they already are so much more involved in these last few weeks, seeing what it is like firsthand. I think it's an interesting thread about talking about different students have access in different ways, and that's being laid more bare now. But also then drilling down on the home level, parents are having more access and insight into what it is actually like for their students to learn. Kareem, I want to end with you. What do you think is going to be the change in U.S. education coming out of this pandemic?
Well, in terms of long-term I would hope that it is more equitable situations. However, I do think that is still a long-term thing. What I hope is going to happen though, like short term, and what I feel is happening, like in my school community, is that we are now becoming a better community with the parents being more involved, right? We've kind of been forced now to figure out better ways to communicate with families, because before it was like we were in our classroom teaching all day. Every once in a while we make some calls after school, and every once in a while we'd have like a back to school night or something like that. Whereas now it's kind of like we're talking to parents all the time. We're working side by side with parents on many occasions. I know that most educators are having a chance now to talk to parents throughout the day, which, when people go back to work, that'll be difficult. But I do think right now we figured out what's the best ways to communicate with parents, right? Like many of the parents in my classroom, English is not their first language, and we figured out a way to communicate online, right? And so with an app called Class Dojo. And I think those are the kinds of things that are happening right now because they have to happen. And I think it'll help schools and individuals reflect on, what worked really well when we were away is parents felt more connected. They know their teachers better now. They know all the therapists of their students. And even teachers feel the same way, like, oh, I now know the parents in my classroom. And that's super, super helpful. And that's something that wasn't as easy to do when we were kind of in class all day. And then we kind of denoted the time we were going to talk to parents. We decided, oh, okay, after school, students leave in my school 3:00. I have till 3:30 to start contacting those parents. So from 3 to 3:30, if I can't get in touch with parents, no good, right? Now, and I'm saying it because I'm thinking about myself. I know that, after school now, because we have kind of this online thing set up, I kind of send the message and it gets to all parents and it gets to them in their language, and same when they send it back to me. So hopefully people are seeing those innovative ways to kind of connect the community more. I think that overall equity is kind of the long-term goal that's going to come from it. I know I'll be advocating for it. I know that many people will be advocating for it. Every single person on the panel talked about it in some way, shape, or form. But the really short-term effects that I'm hopeful about are kind of schools that are more connected.
Thank you to all of you. I think I have so many more questions for you. I think this has been such a fascinating topic, but it's been really illuminative to see that there are a lot of bumps. There's a lot of challenges. You've had to respond really rapidly. Some things are working, some things are not. Some things are really challenging, but we're having an opportunity to actually see them and talk about them now. Thank you to all of you for teaching our children, for soldiering on and trying to figure out ways through this. For connecting with our community here as well. I encourage you after the show to go back, jump in the comments. We have a lot of people asking great questions. I'm here to support each other, other teachers, other parents who are now teachers as well. I want to say thank you, Nadia Lopez, principal in New York City, Kareem Neal, Arizona's 2019 Teacher of the Year, Special Ed High School Education, Treva Daniels-Carlson, a teacher and coach of other teachers in Flint, Michigan, and Laura Morin, a high school math teacher in Miami. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone on the stream, for joining us as well. This has been a really fascinating discussion for me. I hope it's been helpful for you. This is Business Unusual. We come to you live from the LinkedIn editors page Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday at 12 Eastern. Please tune in tomorrow. My colleague Caroline Fairchild will be back with a great episode for you. Thank you and stay safe.